Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. We are going to learn about the story, Mirrors and Rosies. This will be a simple and easy to understand story perfect for practicing your English listening. Let's get started. I see my granddaughter standing in her favorite place, striking a pose, preening in front of the mirror, turning this way and that, first with smile and then with eyes narrowed. Satisfied, or seeing her mother's eyes on her, she reluctantly walks away with a nonchalant air. One of these days, that mirror is going to crack, admonishes her mother. I give my grandchild conspiratorial smile as my mind rushes back a few years, rather decades, remembering another little girl, gazing wistfully into a mirror. This is her story. Little Rose was always quite vain about her looks. She was called Rosalind after her father's favorite Shakespearean heroine. My daughter will be tall, beautiful, and brainy, he asserted. However, everybody called her Rose because, as her indulgent grandmother said, she was pink and dainty like a rose. In Christmas pageants, she was always merry and was the one chosen to present the bouquet to important visitors to the school. After bath, her father used to rock her in his arms and croon, "My little Rose smells like a rose." Growing up on a remote tea estate, she was often left to her own devices. She read a lot and imagined herself to be the heroine of the current book she was reading. Her favorite place was the stool in front of her mother's mirror, where she had long conversations with her best friend, her own image. Her mother chased her away and asked her to play with her brothers or look after her baby sister. She loved telling stories to her younger siblings, tales of adventure with Rose as the central character. Hers was a very happy childhood. When she was 12, her world was turned upside down. One day, she had a severe headache and high temperature. She liked being mildly sick because both her mother and father fussed over her and let her sleep with them. This time, however, it was no ordinary fever, for after a couple of days, small rashes appeared, grew big, and turned into angry blisters. The dreaded smallpox had struck her. The storeroom at the back of the house was turned into a sick room, and her kind grandmother became her nurse, and the only person she saw during those dark days of unbearable pain. This went on for well over a month. Half the time she was delirious, which was a blessing indeed because, as she began to get well, she felt the horrible discomfort of itching and pain. Her hair, the glossy curls which were her proudest possession, came out in clumps. The first thing that was done when she came out of quarantine was to get her hair shaved off. They hid the mirror from her. Her grandmother said she would be sick again if she looked at the mirror. She was bright and did not believe her well-meaning grandmother. She sneaked into her parents' bedroom and stood in front of the mirror. Surely the face which looked back at her with hollow, dead eyes was not hers? It was raw, red, pitted deeply, and with a shiny, newly shaven head, looked grotesque. She felt as if a huge stone had lodged itself in her chest. She turned around to find her mother standing behind her with tears pouring down her face. She hugged her little broken-hearted daughter tightly and sobbed uncontrollably. Rose slowly freed herself and walked back to her room. From that day on, they did not have to hide the mirror, because she simply refused to look at one. She remembered her convalescent period as a time of whispers. Visitors would whisper from the doorway of the sick room, "What a shame!" or, "Such lovely hair." Some would lie blatantly, "How lovely you look." The maids who had kept away started coming back, and she overheard Callie say to the new girl, "I don't know what they've done to deserve such a punishment. Is God punishing me? Have I done something terrible?" Rose lamented again and again. Soon it was time to go back to school, and her parents had quite a few discussions in whispers. Then her father asked her if it worried her to go back to her old school. She looked into his eyes and said she would go wherever he wanted her to go. Her father turned away with a worried frown. Rose's heart was heavy. Since her illness, her beloved father had not once said she was his own little Rose or cuddled her. Actually, none of her little brothers were playing with her or pestering her for a story. Just her little sister, Janet, came over once in a while and, with a wondering look, felt the scars on her face and rubbed her tiny fingers over the stubble on her head. It was decided that she would go to a new school, a co-ed school. On the first day, there were a few curious looks as her father took her into the headmaster's room. After the preliminaries were done, her father asked her to wait outside for a second. She knew, of course, what they were discussing, and her face burnt with shame and eyes glistened with unshed tears. Then the peon rushed out and came back with a lady who smiled at the forlorn little girl, winked at her, and went inside. She did not look at her with pity, but with a twinkle in her eyes when she came out with her father. The lady was to be her class teacher, and also her maths teacher, and, since she was new, would keep an eye on her. Nobody would like to keep their eyes on me, thought Rose bitterly. Contrary to her worst fears, after a few catcalls on the first day, the boys ignored her. Perhaps the little girl with the forbidding face and vacant eyes was not interesting enough. Her maths miss was fun. She would call people to the blackboard to solve problems, and if they were going the right direction, she would hum a jolly tune. If not, a slow and warning one. When Rose's turn came, she actually sang a popular song softly. Rose found herself giggling, and the class broke into a roar of laughter and applause when she got her some right. Then Miss introduced the gardening project. The classroom was part of a little cottage with a quaint veranda in the front. Maths, Miss wanted to make it pretty and homely. The boys had to dig up a bed for flowers, while the girls had different chores of sweeping, sprinkling water, and making a column. Each group of four was given a flower pot and had to take turns to water them. Rose, she said, had to be excused from hard work since she had not been well. But, to be fair, she had to look after a plant all by herself. With that, she handed her a small pot with a weedy-looking rose plant. Rose thought the plant was like her, unattractive, with dry leaves and a hard stump for its stem. However, Miss, when she looked at her unhappy face, said, all that it needs is a little nourishment, water, some manure, and lots of love. She touched the top of Rose's head gently. I'd better do it for her, thought little Rose. As the days wore on, without being aware of it, Rose was changing, laughing a little and slowly losing her solemn look. The stone in her chest was getting slightly smaller, and sometimes it was not there at all. Along with spring came Rose's birthday. Her parents gave her a big kiss, new clothes, and a packet of sweets to take to school. Miss always celebrated each child's birthday, and as Rose did not want to make a fuss, she agreed to wear the simple pink skirt and blouse with the embroidery around the collar. But when Amma said, come, sweetheart, look at yourself in the mirror. You look lovely, she turned away with a scowl and went on her way to school. She was welcomed with screams of delight by her classmates. Miss took her hand and led her to the table. Look, God himself has sent you a present. There on the table was the rose bush which she had watered religiously, but without paying much attention. It had sprouted bright green leaves and slightly reddish new stems. In the middle of the tender foliage, a tiny flower was just opening its petals shyly, a little red jewel. Miss gently plucked it to the collective shout of, "Oh no!" "Wait," Miss said, and took out a length of pink ribbon. Gently, she gathered up the shy girl's hair to the side of her head, tied the ribbon, and pushed the stem of the rose firmly in place. The class clapped. Before Rose could do anything, Miss had produced a mirror from her bag and held it in front of her face, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Utterly confused and taken aback, Rose looked at the mirror and gasped. What had happened to the face with its red pockmarks, which were as huge as craters in her eyes? The face that looked back had scars, yes, but light ones, no longer angry and red. The hair was thick and shiny, the eyes clear but rather sad, rather a pretty face, or at least no longer monstrosity. She put her hand to her mouth and laughed, and when Miss hugged her, she wept with her head on her chest as if something had burst inside her. Miss just let her be and told the class to go out for a bit of fresh air. It was after a long time, it seemed to her, that the little girl raised her head with wet eyes and a watery nose and laughed shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not throwing the mirror at me," countered Miss, with the usual twinkle in her eyes. This is my story. Thus began my journey toward self-acceptance. I came to accept that my face would never launch 1,000 ships, but it was uniquely my own. I also realized that my father loved me, even though I was no Shakespearean beauty. It was a long and arduous journey to reach this place, and it was the kindness and love of a special young teacher, my maths miss, which gave me heart as I took the first tentative steps towards knowing, loving, and accepting myself, scars and all. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. By Buchner. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel.